Welcome back, everybody. This is The Changelog. We're a member-supported blog, podcast, and weekly email that covers what's fresh and new in open source. You can check out the blog at thechangelog.com, our past shows at 5by5.tv/changelog, and subscribe to The Changelog Weekly, our weekly email covering everything that hits our radar in open source. Subscribe at thechangelog.com/weekly. This show is hosted by myself, Andrew Thorpe, and Jerod Santo. Say hello, Jerod.
Hello, how you doing?
Doing pretty good. This is the first time it'll be you and I together without Adam on the show, so we'll see how it goes.
That's right.
This is episode number 104, and we are joined by Gordon Williams, creator of Espruino. How's it going, Gordon?
Yeah, good, thanks.
Real quick, before we jump into it, I just wanted to point out that we have a sponsor for today's show. It's DigitalOcean. DigitalOcean is a simple cloud hosting provider dedicated to offering the most intuitive and easy way to spin up a cloud server. Users can create a cloud server in 55 seconds, and pricing plans start at only $5 per month for 512 megs of RAM and a 20 gigabyte SSD, 1 CPU, and 1 terabyte transfer. They feature a 99.99% uptime SLA and have data centers in New York, San Francisco, and Amsterdam. Their interface has a simple, intuitive control panel which power users can replicate on a larger scale with their straightforward API. DigitalOcean uses KVM virtualization and additionally hosts a library of helpful walkthroughs and tutorials that cover server configuration and optimization. We have a $10 promo. When you enter your credit card info on the billing page, there's a promo code field there, and you can use the coupon code TheChangelog104 to use our $10 promo. You can check them out at DigitalOcean.com. Thanks so much to DigitalOcean for their support. So you do use them, Jerod, is that right?
Yeah, I've been using them, I guess since June or so. Got a few clients on VPSs there. Also have my company stuff on that as well. So I'm a big fan.
Yeah, we have one of our coworkers at Pure Charity, our day job, is switching over to them. So we should see how it goes and probably get him to use the promo code to get him a little discount there.
There you go. Yeah, I mean, the interface is intuitive, super fast and affordable. So I'm definitely a fan and not going to complain about, what is it, $10 off?
Yeah, $10. So it starts at $5 a month. So essentially it's like 2 months free from what I understand, which is not bad.
Right on.
All right, well, let's go ahead and jump into the show. We got Gordon Williams, as I said before, and we're here to talk about Espruino, JavaScript for Things. So why don't you give us a little bit of a introduction. What is Espruino, Gordon?
Okay, so it's basically a JavaScript interpreter that runs on very low footprint devices. So the kind of ARM microcontrollers you get that have the RAM and flash they need included inside them. So, the normal way that you'd go about programming them is you run GCC on host computer and then you compile it and you send it over. But if it doesn't work, especially when you've got it in a system and you don't have a JTAG for it, it's pretty much a black box. If it doesn't work, it's quite painful to try and figure out what's gone wrong. So Espruino gives you almost like a command line interface to it where you can step through, issue commands, and generally have a bit more fun making a project with it. It's maybe not as capable as C++. Well, it's definitely not as capable as C++, but for for actually getting something done, for Arduino style projects, it's great. It makes it a lot more enjoyable.
So this when did this start? The Espruino, I guess, software piece. When did that come about?
Probably about 18 months ago. A bit before that, I bought some of these ARM dev boards and had so much trouble getting toolchain working, especially under Linux. And it just struck me that it was absolutely crazy that you buy this board for £10 or so, and you're fighting with it, and by the time you get to flash an LED on and off, you're so bored you just put it away again. I'd developed a JavaScript interpreter called TinyJS, which was it was just a single file JavaScript interpreter, which I used in a music visualizer that I sell as kind of half a day job, and I thought I could more or less shove that into one of these microcontrollers and see what happened. So that's what I spent the next year or so trying to get working properly.
Gotcha. So you at some point decided to start up a Kickstarter project, and obviously that meant that you needed some funding to get some part of this done. So where did you decide on the Kickstarter, I guess, method of trying to raise funding, and what point in the project did you decide I need funding to do X?
Okay, well, I mean, I'd had the software actually available on the site, and it was actually closed. And what I was finding out was that it really wasn't doing what I wanted it to do. Generally the only people that would get to try it out were people who were already pretty experienced in embedded stuff, because they'd have to get it, they'd have to figure out how to flash the board that they just bought and then put the software on and all the rest of it. So I really wanted like a sort of plug and play solution to it. And it just, the other thing is, almost the immediate question is, well, I've got some JavaScript, but actually I want to interface it to this specific library that I've got in C or C++. Basically people just want to look inside, see how it works, and fiddle with it. And open source is, it's going to be a really nice way of working. Everyone hopefully will be able to see it, play with it, do what they want. But hopefully, again, the people who are maybe more interested in just getting started will just buy the hardware from Kickstarter, and it'll support the work on it.
So the Kickstarter part of this was kind of for creating the actual hardware?
Yes, yeah, pretty much. I mean, just a way that you can take it, you can plug it in, and it'll work straight away. No software or anything to install.
Right. So I guess that kind of brings up an interesting question. So this is called, in the Kickstarter project, is Espruino JavaScript for Things. And you said, obviously, Espruino, it's kind of Arduino style of stuff, but you said that the problem was people were coming with their own boards and trying to figure out how to get it up and running. So it was really it was like experts that wanted to fiddle. And you decided to say, we are going to kind of do both sides of this thing. We're going to do the software side and we're going to do the hardware side. That way, when somebody gets this project, it will require very little setup. Is that right? And they'll just be able to go?
Yes, yeah. I mean, so, it'll still be available because it's open source, and it's quite easy to recompile it to run on different devices. So I'm hoping that you're going to get a group of people who'll run it on whatever they found and port it to all kinds of different stuff. But then you'll get the people who I guess it's aimed at mainly, which is people who just want to get stuff done very quickly, or want to just want to get started with it. Maybe sort of web developers or something who know JavaScript but don't really want to take the plunge to learn C and embedded software at the same time.
Was the choice to go with JavaScript that just because so many people already know it, or because it's a good language? Explain your decision making with JavaScript.
A little. So part of me wanted effectively like a C interpreter, something that the language looked a lot like C, but that you could add stuff to data structures kind of in real time. You could change code without resetting, stuff like that. And I really didn't want to, end up with some other language that wasn't standard that people had to learn. And, when you think of that, there aren't actually... JavaScript's kind of the obvious fit for something that the same kind of pattern as C, with curly braces and plus equals and, for loops done pretty much the same way.
You mentioned on the Kickstarter that the event-based programming of JavaScript is also an advantage. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, so, that... I can't say that was actually something I considered at the start, but as I started implementing it, it just made a massive amount of sense that because you've got the events handled by the interpreter, you basically know when you're idle completely, and you know when you're supposed to wake up. You either wake up because of some external event, or you wake up because of some timer. So it can put itself into really deep sleep modes, which makes it really, really good for battery-powered stuff.
So I think we need to get into, what Espruino is and kind of the use cases. But when I look at the Kickstarter project, and we can talk a little bit more about this later, the thing that jumps out to me, and I think this is true of most projects that are successful, is that you had a 20,000 pound goal, and you're already at almost 58,000 pounds of pledges. So, well, kind of speak a little bit to that kind of a, I don't know, does that say to you that this is something that is desperately needed, or do people just think this is a cool idea? Or, what did that response tell you when you kind of launched this thing?
I don't know. I mean, I think there's definitely a lot of people think it's a very cool thing, and I've heard, repeatedly that people who do JavaScript for their day job just want to kind of pick it up and run with it. There's also quite a lot of interest from the schools because there's a graphical programming language that's kind of Google Blockly, which it'll just output JavaScript code directly. So that kind of bolts on top of it. But the success, I guess it obviously is something that people are interested in. There's also Tessel that's jumped up recently as well, filling a very similar kind of niche.
Were you surprised at this success, or do you expect to knock it out of the park?
Yeah, I am quite surprised. I mean, I always hoped it would do really well, but at the same time, I kind of expected it would be one of the, what are they, 60% that just bomb. So yeah, it was really, really good kind of setting up on the first day and just kind of watching it tick up and thinking, yes, it's going to hit the target, which is great.
Yeah, it's a definitely something that I think JavaScript itself kind of lends itself to I don't know if the word is, I don't know what the right way to say it, maybe easier to pick up for somebody that doesn't, that would like to get started with programming and kind of doesn't want to spend the time learning, some of the heavier languages. But to me, this speaks, you obviously somehow were able to portray to a person on Kickstarter that maybe kind of wants to dabble in technology and not just want to be a hardcore programmer, how they could, do something fun in their life with a language that might be easy to learn and kind of accomplish some pretty cool tasks. So the audience probably is not just programmers, but also just like, people that are dabbling in technology that want to kind of tinker around with this stuff. Would you agree with that?
Yes, yeah, I think so. I think probably having the fact that it's actually a thing that people can kind of get their hands on really helps. I think, and it was a very conscious decision actually going in versus having a Kickstarter for the software. Also because it's a little hypocritical to start off with closed software and then say, I'm going to have a Kickstarter here to open source it. But I think that I think it's been much more successful having hardware with it on that was being part of the Kickstarter rather than just having the software.
Yeah, absolutely. So you kind of you talked about it a little bit. You went from closed source to open source, and would you consider the project to be open source right now, or would you say that once the Kickstarter is funded, which, by the way, just to point out, it is still available to be backed until next Thursday, the September 26th. So as of right now, there's still 7 days to go for the funding of this project, so it's not done yet. So anyone out there wants to kind of get in on this thing, then you can just go to Kickstarter and look for the Espruino JavaScript for Things project and back it. Little side note, little plug for you right there.
The cool thing about these hardware Kickstarters is you're effectively buying the product, right?
Right.
I mean, that may play into why these types of Kickstarters are so successful. Don't necessarily want to make this a show about Kickstarter, but it's cool that you're effectively just pre-ordering one of these things if you get to the third level of backing.
Yeah, 19 Great British Pounds is essentially you're buying the board at that point.
Right.
So that's good, right? Where you landed with Kickstarter and you still have 7 days to go with it. You would say that it's closed source right now, but you're going to open source it after this is funded?
Yeah, I mean it's effectively open source unless everyone hears this show and then cancels their pledge immediately. But at the moment, I've made it for the Espruino board and the other few boards that are out there at the moment, and I'd quite like to tidy up my code quite a bit before I release it. Also because, if people pick it up and start looking at it and then I start changing stuff in the first few weeks after it's out, it's going to be a disaster. Mm-hmm. So I've kind of said, when the Kickstarter ends, I will release it. Source will be going up, whatever state it's in. But before the Kickstarter ends, it just to give me a bit of extra time to get things sorted, really.
Gotcha. So that's a unique, I don't know, that just sounds like a unique path to go. Why don't you speak a little bit to me, it sounds like this is you're very flexible and you're kind of going with it which is the crux of open source, which is what we kind of push, is be flexible, be kind of the visionary of the project, but be willing to go in the direction that the community wants you to go in. And that's kind of what this seems like, is that the project maintainer, you could have very well just been very proud and said, no, you're going to do exactly what I want you to do with it, and it's my way or the highway. But it seems like you're willing to mold this into kind of what the backers of this want. And is that true, or?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, at the end of the day, I guess I want to try and do it in such a way that I can kind of afford to keep spending time maintaining it, supporting users, doing all the rest of the stuff. Because I'm not sure it's really in anyone's best interests if I just have to go out and get like a proper job,
right? And
then effectively dump it. But it's really I want people to use it. In whatever things they want, and it would be amazing if it got ported to a whole bunch of different devices and just people got to enjoy using it.
Yeah. Well, let's kind of step back for a minute, and can you give us any examples of where this what the use cases for it might be, and what kind of real world projects this will make sense with, and maybe some that you've already kind of used it for?
Okay, so I mean, I guess a very obvious one is maybe remote sensing, remote control kind of things, because it's very easy to say, set interval, do this every minute, and it'll go into its kind of low power state. You can be, I don't know, reading a temperature sensor and then either send it wirelessly back or something like that. It's very much kind of simple control things it's quite good at. So, I mean, the obvious one might be like a greenhouse or a plant waterer where, you've got a temperature, you've got a water level, you want to kind of tweak that, but also it's quite nice to get in there and see, and maybe you've got some kind of weird cycle you've set up, and you want to see what the program's actually doing, what the variables are set to. That's somewhere where it's probably quite a lot better than a simple C program running there, because otherwise you're spending half your time writing code to output the state of the program down the serial port.
So it's essentially almost like embedded systems that you can interact with and debug a lot easier.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, it looks like I don't know, the problem that I see with a lot of, I don't know if I would say the problem with a lot of Kickstarter projects, but I think that when maybe you can talk about this a little bit. So you released it with a 20,000 pound goal. So you had in mind of roughly how much an Espruino costs you to make. And so if you got 20,000 pounds supported, you're going to have to make, you can produce this many and send them out. And then obviously you've tripled your goal. So what I've noticed in the past with some Kickstarter projects is when they get well past their goal, they have a hard time fulfilling the amount of orders that came in, because obviously, the bandwidth might not be high enough when you hit those higher limits or those higher thresholds. How are you going to kind of prevent that? Like, how do you make sure that you still stick to your timeline or whatever, your boundary or your limitations might be? How do you make sure that you don't, just honestly just like piss everybody off that backed this thing?
So yeah, I mean that's a definite problem. And if I was, I guess, if I was getting them, if I was like soldering the components on myself, I'd suddenly have a really big problem. But I looked at a few Kickstarters before I did this, and you see people having the problem. And I used Seed for this, which was Seed with 3 E's. They are they call themselves an open hardware facilitator. They do small to medium, large runs of hardware. And I doubt they're the cheapest, but they're quite. They've got quite a good reputation, and they can scale up quite well. If I'd got like 1 million orders or something, then they probably would have had problems. But I think for the moment, and for what we're going to get for this campaign, it's actually going to be absolutely fine, and they will be able to stick to the deadline. Probably, I'm hoping we'll be able to get them out significantly before the deadline, 2 months maybe. But I can't count on that.
Yeah, well, you're guaranteeing the deadline. So as long as you hit that, I don't think anybody will be upset, because people back it assuming that that's when they're going to get it. So you can delight them with early, but you know what I mean? I think, and not to talk negatively about other products on Kickstarter, but that's not what this show is about. But, I've experienced when some products, they go way beyond how much they wanted to raise, and then it took 2 years to get the product, and it was supposed to take 3 months. And I think as long as you can kind of avoid that pitfall, which sounds like you got your ducks in a row to kind of really take care of that, I don't think you're going to really make anyone too angry, so that's a good thing.
No, I hope. I mean, that's the thing. It's much better being starting off with sensible goals than
Right.
coming up with a load of goals that are just going to piss people off.
Right. So you can tell by your accent that you are British, and you're living over. I think. Are you in Cambridge? Is that right?
Yes, we've just moved actually. Just in the middle of moving. We will end up just outside Oxford. So at the moment we're unfortunately a bit between places.
That's all right. So the thing I wanted to kind of ask a little bit is, the last couple of shows we've had people from all over the world. We've had Amsterdam. We've had, I can't even remember all of them, but what is the community like on that side of the pond? Or do you find most of your interaction with Americans, or are you having a lot of people from the United Kingdom, or what is the response to this like? And do you notice any specific areas that seem to respond a certain way?
Well, it's kind of interesting, because I think the response to Espruino itself has been probably much greater in America. I think there's kind of more of this idea that you can go out and make stuff, and a lot of the guys I know in England who are kind of into computer software have are really, really interested in it. But no one's really, if they're not interested in computer software, then they're not really willing to take the leap at all. Which is, it's a bit of a shame. I was kind of hoping that I'd get a few more people who were, just making cool hardware things and wanted to just automate them a little bit. But yeah, I think more of that side's coming from the States, actually. So in terms of, around the area, Cambridge is a really great area for tech stuff. There are a whole load of people there. It's not a huge city by any stretch of the imagination, but people tend to know each other. You always find that you know someone else in the kind of tech industry, by a friend or two.
It's interesting, actually. And just a little quick side note: I went over to, and I'm very open that I absolutely, and I told you this, Gordon, that I absolutely loved my time in England. I'm very drawn to the culture over there. But I went over there a few years ago, and we actually were in Cambridge, and I got in touch with Andrew and Vero Pepperell, the two that kind of created Alfred app for the Mac, and sat down with them at lunch. And they took me out to lunch and paid for it and everything, and the community was awesome over there, right? I just had a great time over there, so I can kind of agree with that the technology community over there, I think, is a real neat one.
Yes, yeah, I think so. Maybe that's more of a Cambridge thing than a Britain-wide thing, but definitely around there it's amazing. And I was very lucky to work for Collabora for a few years, and yeah, I mean, everyone in there, it's, you just get to realise when you're there that it's quite a lot of the city is in that area, and it's really exciting.
Yeah.
So looping back to the use cases a little bit, I'm looking at, you say it's for beginners and experts. I get the beginners thing, absolutely. I mean, I think kids will love this kind of thing, getting them excited about programming because they have that instant feedback, and I think that's very cool. I think on the expert side of a couple of use cases, and I just kind of want to throw this past you and see if this is something that you could do possibly with Espruino. You mentioned that it has wireless capability, at least can hook up to some sort of wireless kit.
Yeah, so it's got, the board itself has got space to plug in little, to solder in a Bluetooth module. And the Bluetooth it's a standard HC05 serial port. So, but when you put that on, you can connect wirelessly to it, and then you can program it. You can talk to it exactly as you would have done through USB.
Cool. So can you also either turn it into some kind of a sensor or attach some sort of sensor? I'm thinking of like beacons that are transmitting data from their surroundings to other devices. Is that kind of stuff possible, or am I?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's in terms of if you have something that, in fact, you can, yeah. If you connect to it via Bluetooth with your phone, you can have it, just send you whatever information it's gathered. And of course, because it's JavaScript, you stick everything into an object, and then you just serialize it into JSON and just print it out.
So the Wi-Fi capabilities, is that one of your stretch goals? Was the Wi-Fi compatibility?
Yeah, and that's now been hit. So I'm going to have to start work on that a bit more heavily. I mean, we've got at the moment it's got a Node.js style HTTP server and client, but they only work when it's compiled onto Linux. So you can it runs on Carambola quite nicely, or Raspberry Pi, stuff like that.
Right.
So I can get a good idea of what it's like, but it's going to be much, much better when it's on, on this small low power chip. Right. And then you can have it running just off battery power, running for months on end. But then just maybe, midnight, it just connects to the internet, sends off the data it's gathered during the day, and then shuts down again. If you're after like massive long battery power.
So to kind of stick there for a minute, being a Kickstarter project and getting past your goal well before the deadline, you had the stretch goals. What I see 3 of them. So I see the Wi-Fi, I see the NPM, the Node.js module loading, and then the OpenWRT package are your 3 stretch goals. Seems like you're about to hit the second one with the NPM, Node module loading. The third goal, the OpenWRT package, to me seems like probably the biggest goal, the one that is potential to really impact the uses of Espruino, greatly with being able to use it on other devices and stuff. So, I mean, is that true? Do you think that 70,000 pound, excuse me if I said dollar a few times, I don't really remember. I'm trying to stick to pound. But if that 70,000 pound goal gets reached, would you say that's probably like a huge milestone in the project?
I'm not too sure about that, because I think probably, as soon as the source is released, it'll take someone just like an hour or two to actually create the package for OpenWRT. I mean, I'm hoping as part of that to do a few things like supporting SPR in it, which will at least, that I think will start to get a lot more interesting, because then you will start to be able to take JavaScript code and run it on the device. When before it was actually a bit of a pain to get stuff in, to say port Arduino code over to C,
right,
to run on Linux, because it's a completely different API.
Mm-hmm. How'd you come up with these goals?
Honestly, it's mostly looking through it. I had a big to-do list of stuff, and there was definite area on that to-do list, which was kind of like, this would be really cool to have, but I can't justify doing it right now, because it's not really going forward in the direction I want to do. So it's quite nice to kind of have an excuse to do that cool stuff. And honestly, I really can't wait to get, like the WR703, the those little TP-Link travel routers, to see it on there and, have people just buying one of them for 20 quid, plugging it in, and being able to use like a nicely packaged Ethernet and Wi-Fi connected and USB connected device.
Yeah, seems like it's I don't know, very exciting thing. The goal is 70,000 pounds. I mean, you got 7 days to go, so we got to put a charge out to the listeners to get it there, right? I mean, that's the we want to get it to that 70,000 so you can actually, as in your own words, start doing the fun parts of the project.
Yeah, no, it'd be great.
Cool. Well, this, I don't know. I'm not very. I've not been very active in the Arduino, the Raspberry Pis of the world, and this kind of embedded stuff. So for somebody like me that has not really dabbled in this stuff very much, how do I get started? Let's say I'm going to wait, and let's say I'm a backer. January, I'm going to get my device, but before then, I want to do something to prepare myself so that I'm not just an idiot when it shows up. How do I get started, and what do I need to learn?
I'm hoping that there won't be a great deal to learn. Because you already have some idea about how to use JavaScript, and on the electronics side, I'm very much focusing on that there's a lot of really cool hardware now that is very much purely digital. You just connect it in via, sometimes 2 wires, but maybe 6, and it's just plugging A to B. And then it just springs into life. You don't have to have a huge amount of electronics knowledge or anything like that. I mean, with Espruino itself, maybe get a soldering iron, have a quick play around. There are plenty of things that show how to solder simple things together. But for Espruino, it's pretty much soldering pins onto it and then whacking whatever you want onto the pins.
So where can I go to kind of learn about how to do that? I'm trying to dig out of you just something for our listeners that maybe have never done any of this stuff.
That is something that there are actually a good post on the Kickstarter from someone who had found and learned a lot of these. Unfortunately, I have to say that my dad was quite into electronics, and I just learned as I was growing up, so I just don't know about those myself. But I can find the link and you can post it on the website or whatever.
Well, it looks like some of the money should be going to producing more documentation, tutorials, example projects, and videos. Is that a short-term plan, a long-term plan?
That's both really. Short-term, I want, as soon as people have got the boards, I want the website to have a good getting started section, which covers all this stuff about how you would go about soldering stuff on, what are the easy things to get to plug into it to do fun things really quickly. Going on from that, I obviously want to build up the library of drivers that are in there and the documentation that goes with them. And I'm kind of hoping a load of people will, as they do fun little projects with it, they'll kind of contribute back, how they've done it, the code they used, or all that stuff. So that people have a good library of stuff to build from. If you've just got it and you don't actually have that many ideas about what you can do, you can just flip down the list and be like, oh, I can do this in an hour or two.
So there are currently some tutorials on the website. I don't know if we mentioned it. The website is www.espruino.com. It's espruino.com. And there's already some tutorials and examples and a forum on the website. And that's kind of a little bit of what I was getting at, that the website will probably be a place for you to kind of go and read about and get started and learn just, maybe a little bit more of the basics on how a lot of this stuff works. But I guess so you kind of talked about you would like to have it by the time the device is getting in people's hands. So would you say the website will look different come January than it does now, or maybe not look different, but just have more content on it?
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, for starters, I'm moving everything over to all the documentation is going on GitHub. So I'm hoping at least if people have changes to do, they just give me a pull request. And then that'll be prettified and pulled on the website, as well as all the code snippets are going to have a link on them, which will hopefully go to the web app, which is it's a Google Chrome packaged app, and Google Chrome has access to the serial port. So you literally, no software to install, even if you don't have a terminal application, you just get Chrome, get the web app, and then it just connects and you can use it straight away. Right. And with the link, hopefully you get a code sample, you just click the button and it'll go straight into it, and then you can put it on the board.
So I wanted to meant to hit on that a little bit earlier. You just teased it a little bit, but even if you have no idea about programming, the Espruino has a web-based, graphical code editor, I think is what you actually call it. So you just talked about that a little bit. So this is the code editor itself the Google Chrome extension? Yeah,
so it's kind of three things wrapped into one. You've got a normal serial port terminal, like say on Windows it would be PuTTY or Minicom on Linux. But then that's kind of the left-hand side of the pane. On the right-hand side, you've got a syntax highlighted editor. Or you've got this graphical editor as well, which is Google Blockly. So it looks just like Scratch, but Blockly itself will it kind of serializes it into JavaScript or various other languages. So it's quite nice to just be able to take that and put it straight on the device. And the kind of the structures in it are a really good fit for event-based code. You can have, when button 1 is pressed, run this instruction and this instruction and this instruction. Whereas obviously if you had like an Arduino loop, it's not quite as easy to for people to understand exactly what they're supposed to do with it.
Gotcha. You talked a little bit about, you didn't talk about it, you just mentioned Tessel earlier in the show. So it sounds like that would be maybe who you would consider your competition. Is that right?
Yeah, well, I mean, they're so they are a JavaScript microcontroller, but they're going at it from a slightly different angle. They basically, they're going after very internet connected, so it's got Wi-Fi on it. But because of that, they've given themselves a bunch more RAM and flash, like I think 32 meg of each. So they're going to have a lot of trouble hitting the very kind of low power consumption target.
Gotcha.
So yeah, they're heading kind of from a higher level downwards, really. Definitely going for Node.js, and I'm very much going for sort of Arduino hardware hacking kind of things up. So, you mentioned earlier about, what you'd use it for if you were an expert. Mm-hmm. And really the answer is, just having fun hacking a project together. It's not going to be a, 1 million line monster you're going to make with it. But there's a whole bunch of stuff that you might want to do around your house, or you might, want to automate your remote control car or whatever. You can just actually, you do your day job, you get home, and you can actually enjoy doing this. It's not just, sitting in front of a computer hacking out code line after line. It's, you're actually interacting with it and you're having fun playing with it.
Right. So when you say expert, you're not necessarily meaning that I'm not going to build a commercial product on top of Espruino. But you mean expert as in, I know what I'm doing and I can do lots of cool stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
Gotcha.
And when somebody asks you, it's kind of interesting. It's like when somebody asks you what what you would use an Espruino for, it's kind of like saying, I mean, it's a microcontroller, right? It can kind of do everything. So it's kind of like saying, what can you do with programming? And the answer is kind of just everything, right? It's hard to just nail it down. But it sounds like the Espruino's target is, like you said this a few times, low power consumption. So it's like the smaller, maybe more personal style stuff that you want to accomplish in your house more so than, anything on a large scale, which I guess you just said and I just repeated.
Yeah. I think, you could use it in industrial things if you want. I know of a few people who've contacted me who were, they were using BASIC before in their industrial systems, and they wanted to kind of modernize it a bit. And, if you're actually using BASIC for your stuff, then Espruino is probably a really good thing to use. But I would imagine the majority of people have just got stuff in place to use, to just use C basically for anything commercial.
Right. Let me ask you. I saw a long time ago, and I'm sure I could bring it up, but it was a few years ago. I saw somebody used a Arduino to, I don't remember exactly how it worked, but basically they were controlling their lock on their front door with an Arduino, and like a passcode was color-based. Can you use Espruino to kind of do something like that?
Color-based?
It was like you had to get hit the colors in the right order. It's like a key, essentially just like a passcode, but instead of numbers, they use colors.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that kind of thing is, it's going to be very simple. It's going to be, I don't know, 20 lines of code at most to get that working. So yeah, for those kind of things, it's really perfect. Right. If you're interacting with a human, you're never really going to have any speed issues at all. It's thousands of times faster than you'd need for anything like that.
Right. That's cool. Yeah, it's definitely a neat project, and I think that JavaScript is a great language for something like this. We have a lot of, we hear both sides of it on different projects. JavaScript's, nobody wants to use JavaScript, everybody wants to use JavaScript. It doesn't really seem to fall in the middle too much, but definitely is a language, I think, personally, that it's great for beginners, great for people that want to just kind of put stuff together. And to me, this is probably the first microcontroller that I'm really excited to just actually mess around with, because I feel like I don't have a huge barrier of entry of things I have to learn to start hacking on it. So I'm excited about it. I think we could talk about it forever, but maybe we'll have you on the show longer than 4 months to talk about the feedback you've gotten and the coolest thing people are doing with it.
Cool. Thanks. Yeah.
So for all of our listeners on the show, and for the new listeners, we kind of do the same set of questions at the end of every show to kind of give you some insight into the person we're talking with. So the first one, and I don't know how appropriate this question is for the current state of the project, but maybe you'll know something. But the first one we'd like to ask is for a call to arms. So something you would like to see the community get involved with or help out with.
Definitely, if you can't wait now, you can check it out on the website. The source isn't released, but there are binaries for a few popular platforms. If you like it, please back us on the Kickstarter, because kind of the more support we get, the more I can do, hopefully. But when the source is released, it would be great to have people looking out for interfacing it to more devices, optimization. There are quite a few areas where it can be made a bit more efficient, a bit faster. So yeah, it'd be great to just have people looking at it, playing around with it, and just giving feedback, really.
Right. So right now, get over to Kickstarter and back this thing.
Would be nice, yeah.
When it comes out, get over to the repository and help with this thing.
So Gordon, I'm on your Kickstarter page, and I'm about to back you, but let me ask you this. My MacBook doesn't have a serial port. Do I need to get the Bluetooth one? Or
does it? It has a USB port, surely.
Oh, USB, you can just do serial.
Yeah, sorry. So
I was thinking the old school serial ports.
No, so the board, you can connect via serial, but it's got a USB port on it, and it appears as a USB CDC device, which is kind of pretty much a complete standard, which means that you don't need drivers or anything. You just plug it into your Mac, and it will be recognised, and then you can use Screen to connect to it.
Cool.
So no software to install, no nothing. You just type like 8 characters or something, and you're in.
Awesome. Thanks.
Awesome. So if you weren't doing what you're doing now, so imagine yourself not touching Espruino at all, what would you like to be doing?
Now that's a question. I mean, my goal has always been, I'd just love to get a job doing what I love doing, and a lot of that's just tinkering around with hardware or bits of software. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm hoping Espruino will allow me to at least to keep doing that without having to get a real job. But outside Espruino, I'd have to think around for a bit and try and find another way of doing that, I think.
Man, I just if I were you, I would just be wandering around the countryside in England, man. I think I've been told I gotta visit, what is it, the Lake District? Is that what it's called?
Yeah, so my wife and I actually met doing just basically wandering around England. And it's a lovely place to kind of to walk, as long as you've got a raincoat. It's good.
Yeah. And lastly, your programmer hero, or just anyone in your life to give a shout out to that's impacted you greatly with what you're doing.
So I've kind of got like a little bit too, I guess. I mean, when I was growing up around that time, I was playing things like Wolfenstein and Doom, and
oh yeah,
just seeing someone get so much out of a computer when, I was programming at the time. I was kind of interested in graphics, and there's a real disconnect between kind of the speed I could manage and the speed John Carmack and its software could manage. Mm-hmm. And that was like, it's just really cool to have something where you can look up to it and you can say, wow, this is cool, I wish I could do that. I mean, the other thing is my dad. I mean, he's been electrical engineer for 40, 50 years or so, doing software and hardware. And so there were like computers laying around the house while I was growing up, and it's just been, that's been what caused me to get to where I am. Just kind of having them from sort of, having like a soldering iron for my 7th birthday or something. Not many people would be crazy enough to do that, but not many people would do that. So yeah, that's it.
That's awesome. Well, thanks so much again for coming on the show. I mean, I think the project is a ambitious one, and it's one that's going to be exciting to see unfold. Once again, you have 1 week left as of right now, so I guess September 26th is when the project comes to a close on Kickstarter. So if you're listening to the show, head on over there. I mean, there's definitely still time to back, and it's not expensive to be able to get your hands on your own Espruino and start to build your own color-coded door lock or whatever you want to use it for. But no, seriously, thanks so much for coming on with us and just talking. I mean, it's a privilege to hear some perspective from you.
Well, brilliant. Thank you.
I want to give a shout out to DigitalOcean again for sponsoring the show. Head on over to DigitalOcean.com to set up your cloud server today, and make sure you use the promo code TheChangelog104 to get $10 off. And as a member, you get special benefits. You can head on over to thechangelog.com/benefits to access our exclusive members-only $20 promo code for DigitalOcean. You can sign in or become a member today to get access to this and many other partner benefits. That's it for this week. Thanks again to Gordon for joining us, as well as Jerod for making a special appearance. And also, thanks to the listeners for tuning in and for your support. If you haven't yet, subscribe to the Changelog Weekly, where we share everything that hits our open source radar. Subscribe at thechangelog.com/weekly. Until then, let's say goodbye.
See ya.
Bye.